So this is going to be an interactive talk today. And so the first thing that I'd like you to do is I'd like you to start thinking about the leader that you most want to emulate. Who is that leader above all other leaders that you would follow to the ends of the earth? Now, hopefully you have this person in your mind. Start thinking about 3 traits that really embody this person. What are 3 traits that set them apart from everybody else you've ever known? And so if you have some trouble thinking about it, here's sort of a list. And I'll give you a couple of seconds to start thinking about who this leader is and what those 3 traits are. Okay, now as I said, this is going to be interactive. So if you will, please take out your polling device. My polling device looks something just like this. We're going to be using Slido today. And so if you will, please scan in the code that you see here. You can also go to slido.com and there's going to be a passcode, which is going to be CGS. But if you will, please go to the Slido, but go to the polls section and not to the Q&A. So I'll give you also a second for that. So what I would like to know are what are the 3 traits of that leader that you most want to emulate? So type them in separately. So if it's courage or confidence, put those in separately. And it always takes a minute for Slido to catch up on us. Oh, they have humility. They're kind. They're empathetic. They're assertive. They're confident. They have humility. They have confidence. They're persuasive. Now, if you have 3, great. If you have 5, since we have such a small group, go ahead. If they only have 1, that's fine as well. They're supportive. Maybe they're honest. I was actually doing this about a month or 2 ago, and somebody wrote in that they don't schedule meetings at 4:30 on a Friday. And I was like, oh man, yeah, that's definitely one of those that is like, if there was ever a winner, that would probably be it. Okay, it looks like we kind of leveled out. So we know that they might be confident. They might be compassionate. They might have honesty. They lead by example. They are a great example. So I've been going around the world and I've been asking this question. I've been doing this for about 5 years now. And what I've done is I've collected like almost 5,000 different responses. And so if I take all of this and I'm going to take each one of these, for instance, assertive is going to be one, compassion is going to be another, honesty. And so we're going to collect all of those. And if I take all of those and I create a word cloud out of it, it looks something like this. As you can see, empathetic is one of those traits that a lot of people are looking for. And several of the traits that you also put in, you can see them here. Now, when I look at this, it tells me 2 different things. Number 1, it tells me what people aren't necessarily looking for in their leaders. And this is what I mean. When I started this, I was still in the military. And I asked several of my friends, and I thought I was going to get a lot of things like they are bold and they are powerful and they are fearless. But where are bold, powerful, and fearless on this list? They're there, but they're just very small. It's a lot of those softer skills that people are looking for in those leaders. They're looking for somebody who's honest, that leads by example, that might be decisive. But here's where I think the disconnect is. When you go to your local library, when you go to the airport and you're looking at the bookstore, where are the books about being an empathetic leader or being a decisive leader or leading by example? I see all of these books about how to be a fearless leader. So what this tells me is that there is a disconnect between what people think that they should be as a leader and what people are looking for in their leaders. So here's a second thing that it tells me. Well, I'll tell you a story. I've got a really good friend named Doug, and we were in the military together, and he is one of those super charismatic guys. He's the one who's always going out and shaking people's hands and patting them on the back and, hey, you're doing awesome. He's very charismatic. And then I looked at him and I thought, I'm always looking for ways that I can maybe stretch my own leadership abilities to maybe grow in different ways. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to try to be like Doug. And I did. I was charismatic. And I lasted for 2 whole days. And then I was like, man, I needed to take a nap after that. Because I realized that, okay, you know what? I can be charismatic from time to time, but man, I can't be charismatic all day long. It wears me out. So I had to start to look at, well, what are my true traits? And you know what? I know that I lead by example every single day. I try to be decisive. I am passionate about what I do and how I can help my people. I also know that I'm empathetic. And so the second thing that it told me was that, you know what, you don't have to be one or another on this chart because people are looking for the traits that you already have. So think about your own strengths, your own traits. Are you honest? Are you self-confident? Do you have integrity? Because people are looking for you to lead them. And I think that's what's so important is that stop trying to be like somebody else and just hone in on the traits that you already have because, again, people are looking for you to lead them. Because right now there's really a large divide that I'm seeing within our entire community. We have ourselves and we basically have the team on the other side. So I'd like to introduce you to the trust bridge. Now, we all know as engineers, there's all types of bridges. You got trestle bridges, you have arch bridges, you have suspension bridges. But I want to talk to you about the trust bridge. Now, as you know, bridges are made up of different components. We have foundations, and we also have the superstructure. So the first thing that I'd like to talk to you about is the first foundation, and that's you. Because this is where it all starts. Does anybody know what this means? It means to know thyself. And I know we've heard that probably over and over again, but this is one of the Delphic maxims. It was written on the Temple of Apollo in 1400 BC. If it was important enough for those guys to etch it in stone then, it's probably still important for us now. As leaders, we need to know who we are. We need to know what we bring to the fight. And so I call it my 3 B's. Number 1, be self-aware. And we'll get to this probably at the end, but start thinking about, have you ever taken any of those personality tests? Myers-Briggs, Clifton Strengths, DISC assessments, 360 assessments. Start thinking about those tests that you've had and what they told you. Now, I'm not talking about going on like TikTok or Instagram or something like that and taking the, if you were a Disney princess, what kind of personality would you have? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about these other personality tests. A lot of times they tell us what our strengths are and also what our weaknesses are. And I will tell you that I was the biggest skeptic of these tests. I thought, how on earth is me filling in all of these little bubbles going to tell anybody about who I am? I'm an individual. And I was dead wrong. Man, that thing absolutely nailed me. Yes, I had a pretty good idea what my strengths were. And yes, it was kind of hard to read, but going through my challenge areas and some of my weaknesses, that was good. One of the most important things that it told me was also what my blind spots were. I'm a very focused person. That's one of the reasons why people want to work with me as an engineer, because I will make sure that I get the job done on time to the exact specifications that are needed. But I'm also so focused that my husband can be downstairs saying, "Hey, Jen, it's time for dinner." And I might not even hear him. What does it say about my leadership style? If I'm so focused on what I'm doing, then I'm blocking out everything and everyone around me. So knowing those blind spots, I can now start to put this more into my conscious of these are the things that I need to be aware of. Yes, it's great to be focused, but at the same time, I need to make sure that I'm still pulling back and making sure that I know what all of my teammates are doing. So be self-aware. Go out, take one of these exams, find out what your strengths, your weaknesses, and also what your blind spots are. Next, be yourself. Now, I told you about me trying to be like Doug and absolutely failing at it. But you have to also be yourself. When we go out into the world and we're working as an engineer, a lot of people are looking at us to have all of the answers. And whenever I first started out, I thought, I know all the answers. I graduated, I'm smart, and I know what I'm doing. And I really didn't. I didn't realize everything that I didn't know. And I was trying to be like other people. Like I'd see all of these other people that were, they were so confident in what they did. I needed to learn as much as I could so that I could finally get to the place where they were. But for a while, to be honest, I was just kind of faking it until I made it. Don't do that. Be yourself. Learn at your own pace. It's going to benefit you in the end. And next, be open. Now, when I've talked to a lot of millennials and Gen Z, just like you, whenever I start to talk about being open and being more empathetic, you're a lot more receptive. When I talk to people around my age and the baby boomers, they're a lot more closed off. And I think, no, I don't necessarily want to do this. Now, I showed you earlier when I take 5,000 different responses of what people are looking for in their leaders, empathetic is the one trait that was asked for by more than any other trait. And being the big nerd that I am whenever it comes to data and analytics, I decided I want to understand a little bit more about this. So I started to dig in to all of the responses that I'd had. And so I took just the answers from 2022, just last year, and it looked like this. Empathetic outpaced every single other trait in 2022. Leads by example is right up there, as well as being honest. But people are looking for empathy. We've all been through some pretty hard times over the last several years. A little empathy goes a long way. So what is empathy? Empathy is the ability for us to share and understand other people's feelings. It gives us the capacity to stand in somebody else's shoes so you understand better their perspectives and their motivation. So here's an example. I have a great friend and she has a pet pig. Unfortunately, the little piggy died recently. Now, I've never owned a pig, but would just like a raise of hands. Does anybody else here have dogs or cats? What would it feel like if your beloved companion died? I know I'd be devastated. And so even though whenever I heard that little piggy died, my first thought was, Woohoo, bacon! Okay, folks, that's not empathy. Okay, that's not empathy whatsoever, okay? But when I started to relate, whenever her little pig died, to one of my dogs dying, I had a better understanding of how she might be feeling. So what does this look like in the workplace? It means that we're paying attention to the people that are around us. Start asking questions. Maybe you've noticed that for some reason, somebody over here, they were a stellar performer, but all of a sudden now they're really having a hard time. Go ask them questions. Maybe you can find something in their life that you can relate to so that you better understand how they're showing up at work. There's a lot of divorces going on right now. I've got another friend who's going through a divorce. And to be honest, man, he cannot keep a thought straight in his head. It is absolutely taking over his personal life. He's really suffering at work because he just can't concentrate. And he's always been one of the most stellar performers that are out there. Now, I've never been divorced, but whenever I see one of my teammates that are also going through a divorce, I can remember how my friend's going through and everything that he's having to battle with on a day-to-day basis. And so that's what empathy is. It allows us to better understand other people's feelings and perspectives and moods by channeling maybe something that's within ourselves or something that we've experienced. 64% of people who have left their jobs in the last 18 months have done so because they were looking for a boss that showed more empathy. We all need a little bit more empathy in our lives. And so, like I said, with this group, like between the millennials and Gen Zs, I think you guys are really good at this. So keep doing what you're doing. But realize there's a lot of people that are in my generation and also that are baby boomers that are a lot more closed off. Help them the way that you can. They might not be receptive to it. So understand that as well. So these are my 3 Bs. So be self-aware. Go out and take one of these tests. Be yourself. Stop trying to be like somebody else. It is exhausting, and people will see right through you. And last, be open. Continue to be open. So going back to our bridge, our second foundation. This is our personnel. So we're going to have a couple more polls. I'd like to know, do you know all of your teammates' names? So this might be your peers. This might also be any subordinates that you might have. Do you know all their names? Got a lot of yeses. Okay, that was an easy one. Next, if they have a significant other, do you know their names? Got some yeses, looks like more nos. Okay. You know if they have kids or pets? Isn't it funny how sometimes we know better about like if they have kids or pets than their spouse's names or their significant other's names? Okay, so we're doing really good on the kids and pets. Okay, on average, what is their favorite sport? So say you have 5 people on your team. Of those 5, what's the majority? Right on, hockey. I'll just tell you right now, I'm a Detroit Red Wings fan, so please don't hate me, okay? Looks like we got a lot more soccer, hockey, other. I'd be really interested to see what other is. So if you can, just put that in the chat and I'll be able to read it in a little bit. I did this overseas in Hungary and everybody was putting down F1 racing. And I was like, holy cow, like I never even thought about that. All right, so here's the most important one. You know your teammates' goals and aspirations. Looks like we have a lot of no's. And you might be thinking, wow, this is like a lot to know. So I'd like to introduce you to Rudy. Now, Rudy was the president and CEO of a company that I recently worked for before I started my own company. You might know him as Rudy Bonaparte. He's done a lot of really great geotechnical work. When I first went to work for the company, we were at about 600 people. When I left the company, it was at 1,200 people. Within 4 years, we went from 600 to 1,200. And here's why. When I first started there, I was working in my office. I lived in the Bay Area, and Rudy, who lived in Atlanta, had to fly out to San Francisco. And he came in my office and he says, "Hey, Jen, how are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh my God, the president of the company is like in my office right now." I was like completely shocked. And he's like, and we sat down and we had this fantastic conversation. And he says, "Hey, Jen, it's been great talking to you. Thank you for joining the company. I need to go talk to some other people down the hall." Wow. Like, I'm actually kind of feeling all warm and fuzzy on the inside. Like, the president of the company came in and talked to me. Well, about 8 months go by, and Rudy has to fly from Atlanta back out to the San Francisco Bay Area for a couple meetings. And he comes back in my office and it's like, "Hey, Jen, how are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm great, Rudy. Thanks for asking." And then he says, "Hey, how are you and your husband, Sean, doing?" Oh, can't believe like he knows my husband. Oh, I guess I talked to him about my husband previously. I was like, "Hey, Rudy, everything's going great. Thanks so much for asking." And then he says, "Hey, how's that project that you're working on Anchorage, where you're looking at the landslide capability during large earthquakes?" Now, at any one time, I might be working on 6 or 7 different projects. And he remembers this project that I'm working on. And I tell him, "Well, it's going great. We are making such incredible strides. We're doing all this research. I mean, this is really going to be something whenever we're able to wrap all this up." And then he tells me, "That's really important. I'm going to go talk to your boss, Chris, because I want you to get this written up and I want you to get this published." Wow. The president of the company wants me to write a paper. And I think all of you know like how important it is to get your work out into peer-reviewed journals. And he wants me to do this. And then he's like, "Hey, Jen, I gotta go. I need to go talk to some other people down the hall. Great seeing you." Okay, so I'm absolutely just blown away. So here's somebody who actually remembers my name, remembers my husband's name, remembers what project that I'm working on, but also seems to be interested in my professional development. And I go into the break room and I'm telling my colleague this, and I'm like, he knows all this stuff about me. Is he a stalker? And my colleague laughed and said, no, he's not a stalker. He's got a trick. And what he does is he takes notes on note cards. And he has a note card for each person in the company. So when he flies from Atlanta out to San Francisco, he grabs his stack. And on the plane, he starts to read through each one of the cards. And then at the end of the day, when he's talked to you, he goes and he updates those cards. A couple months ago, I talked to Rudy and I said, "Rudy, this is the most amazing trick that you have." And he said, "Jennifer, it was never a trick. I was afraid that I would start to forget some of the important conversations that I had had with my employees." And he finished it up with this. He wanted us to be a family. And he had that commitment that as the CEO, like he was all about the people. As I told you, within a few years, we went from 600 to almost 1,200 people. This type of leadership started at the top and rippled down through the rest of the organization. Now, Rudy was old school, and he had those little note cards. Think of everything that we have at our disposal. You know, we've got our phones, we've got tablets, computers, even note cards. Like I actually have a bunch of little stickies so that I can remember one of my assistants' cats' names. It's Momo and Clementine. But I have these types of things so that I can help remember what's going on with my own teams. So start to think about getting to know your teams. Start asking questions. Start getting to know them. Because that's where loyalty really starts to begin. And I'll be honest, Rudy stepped down about the time that I was looking to start my own company. And somebody else came on. And they completely changed the culture of the company. Instead of feeling like a family, it was all about metrics. And you know what? A lot of people started to leave. It's so important to get to know your team. It'll inspire trust. It'll inspire loyalty. So now, let's talk about the superstructure of the trust bridge. Now, I've found over my last 20-something years of working, there's really about 3 main reasons why people don't want to trust. I've been burned before. Anybody else ever feel like this? Probably you have. I think everybody has felt this way from one time to another. I had a boss at another company, and I had this great idea for the client. So me and a couple of the teammates, we worked on it, and we gave it to my boss, then he took it to the client, and then he took all the credit. He never once mentioned the people who actually put it together. Do you think I'm ever going to want to do anything for that boss again? No, not at all. So at this point, I'm also going to give you some secret military lingo that hopefully you can take into the workplace. A lot of times we call these people blue falcons. I'm going to keep this PG. So what a blue falcon stands for is really a buddy effer. I'll let you take it from there. But it's always this person who's always saying that they're going to do something and they don't. Whenever things start to go the wrong way, they're the first person to throw you under the bus. My boss took all the credit. He is a blue falcon. So again, this is secret military lingo. You can kind of use it with your friends, but just know that that's what a blue falcon is. Next. Maybe you're new at this. Maybe you're new at the position that you're in. Maybe you're new to the company. Maybe you're new to the department. Whatever that might be. You finally have leveled up. You're maybe in a position of authority. You don't really know who to trust. You don't know other people's, you don't know their strengths. You don't know their weaknesses. This, as we call the FNG, the FN new guy or girl. So if you're the FNG, a lot of times what you want to say is, you know what? I need to prove myself, or I don't know who to trust. And so a lot of times we basically use the phrase, I'll do it all myself. I know that I've been in this position several times. So hopefully we're able to get over being the FNG, and so that we feel more confident, so that we can go out and start to trust people and know that we don't have to do it all ourselves. So next, trusting can be terrifying. You heard that I was in charge of 1,800 people. That can be pretty terrifying to try to trust that many people. Now, this person is usually the HMFIC, the head mofo in charge. So if you're the HMFIC, it can be really hard to trust other people. You start to look at them and say, like, if I give this away, Will the mission or the project be done correctly? Will it be done on time? Will it be done to my specifications? God forbid the wheels fall off the bus. What would happen? We start to think, how will this affect me and my position? And so trusting can be very hard. And to be honest, I'll admit, it's something that I always have to work on, is that, I have the ability to micromanage. And that's not what we want to do as leaders. And so being able to trust, being able to let go, that can be terrifying for a lot of people. So again, you have the Blue Falcon, you have the FNG, and you have the HMFIC. But if you're on the other side of this and you're not being trusted, it all looks the same. Maybe you're being micromanaged. Maybe you're not being able to do what you know that you can do because your boss wants to hold it all inside. So start thinking about that. What does this look on the other side of not being trusted? Think about a time, either in your personal life or even in your professional life, when you were not trusted. What did that feel like? Probably feels pretty horrible, doesn't it? Feels like, why do I even show up? Why should I even contribute? I feel like a loser. There's probably several feelings that you probably have if you're not being trusted. So try to turn that around and start to realize what it means to actually trust people and how you can make them feel. So building trust, this is so important. Start by asking questions. If we talked about, like, what's your spouse's name? What are your kids' names? What kind of dogs, cats, hamsters, lizards, whatever. But then also start to ask some of the really important questions. What are your goals? What are your aspirations? Does one of your teammates want to someday be president of the company? Or maybe they're just really happy where they are. Do they need more time? Do they need more training? Do they maybe need a new piece of software so they can be more efficient in their job? And as you become a leader, and maybe you're new to the team, go around to each person on your team and get to know that person and what they bring to the overall project. And maybe you don't understand maybe something that Bob is doing. Have the courage to go and talk to Bob and say, Bob, can you explain a little bit more about what this process is? Because what will happen is they'll realize this person actually cares. They care about what I'm doing. And also they might want to show off a little bit, like, hey, the boss is asking me this. Just ask questions. Have the courage. Have the confidence. Go and start asking questions. It's going to make you a better engineer. It's going to make you a much better leader. Next, communicate. Often and with transparency. As leaders, a lot of times we have a lot of information that we might not want to give out. Holding all of that in, that doesn't inspire trust. Make sure that you're continually communicating with all of the members of your team, not just your subordinates, but also everybody that's a peer to you as well, and your bosses. But here's the thing about communication. I had a boss who was a baby boomer, and he used to write these super long emails. And I'll be honest, with probably me, the millennials, we read like the first paragraph and then skip to the end. Anybody else? Probably so. Now, on the other hand, I had a lot of millennials that also used to work with me. And we were always on the chat, like all the time, asking questions and just really communicating about the project. Well, the thing was that my boomer boss didn't know how to operate the chat. So whenever he would write all of these long emails, we would only get like maybe 20% of what he was trying to say. But because we were using the chat function all the time, he was getting 0% of what we were saying. There's not one communication style that is going to benefit everybody. So realize that going in. Realize that whenever you send an email, you can't fire and forget. Different people receive information in different ways. Some people are visual learners. Some people have to hear it. Some people like short little messages. Some people like really long messages. Just realize that there is no one communication style that is going to fit everybody that you need. And then finally, listen. Just listen. Actively listen. And I'll be honest, this is actually one of those things that I also have to work with. It's like, whenever you're talking to me, I'm already starting to think about like what I want to answer. That's not actively listening. Let all the information come in and then respond. And I'll just tell you, my husband is like the worst at this. Like, I'm already talking and he's like talking on top of me. So like he still needs to work on the active listening part. So start to build that trust. Because if you don't show it, guess what? People don't know that you trust them. People are looking to go to organizations where they feel trusted, where they feel like they're part of a team. And if you're shutting them out, that's not going to help. So I'd like to finish up with some tips for leadership. Now, here's the exciting thing. Being a geotechnical engineer, it's a lot like leadership. Because what do we do as geotechnical engineers? A lot of times we have to go out in the field and we have to try something to see if it works, right? It's the same thing with leadership. As you guys are starting to become great engineers and leaders, try different things. Try different styles. Let's say that you're one of those super charismatic people, but whenever you feel like you go to the office, you have to be quiet. What if you start to let a little bit of that charisma out? Feel a little bit more comfortable with who you really are. So geotechnical engineering, exactly like leadership. Try it, see if it works, and if it doesn't, go back and refine it. Leadership, basically the same thing. So here's a few tips. If you can, make mistakes. Make mistakes now. A lot of times we make mistakes because we're trying things for the very first time. And it's okay, as long as you know the consequences. Think about risk, think about consequences, think about probability. But if you realize that the consequences and the risk of making those mistakes is pretty low, then go do it. Try something new, try something that you've never done before. This isn't just your personal life or your professional life, this is in your personal life as well. Go skydiving, I don't know. Well, don't make a mistake skydiving, that's probably a bad example. But go out and try new things. Next, underwrite others' mistakes. So a company that I went to, I'd been there for a month and a half, and they selected me to go with my boss's boss to Japan. We were doing some really big calculations. This was actually for the largest crane in the world. It had this huge circular track, and it was being built on sabkha. And I don't know if you know what sabkha is, but a lot of times in the desert, you have a crystalline structure. But anytime it looks like it's pretty strong, but as soon as you put weight on it, it absolutely flattens out. So we have this huge track for the world's largest crane. And we know that there's pockets of sabkha here and there, but it's really difficult to try to find. And so we only have so much of a tolerance that we can have if like one of these little pockets basically smashes down, like it's going to basically ruin the entire crane. Well, my boss, I had just gotten there, he had been working for almost 3 months on this Excel spreadsheet. I don't know who's still using Excel. I don't know why. Had all of these different macros. He had all these different lookup tables, and it was like, he's like, this is the best thing. You take this with you. Like, I've looked at this, like, take this with you, go to Japan and like get this thing done. Like, oh, okay, cool. So me and my boss's boss go to Japan. And we start working with their counterparts in Japan for this like huge circular track that's built on sabkha. And all of a sudden we realize that there's a mistake. There's a mistake somewhere in this ginormous Excel spreadsheet. So I go up to my boss's boss and I say, there's a problem. Like this is a serious problem. Something is not right. He underwrote that mistake. He went to the client and said, we have a mistake. And I literally spent the next 8 hours trying to comb through that huge Excel spreadsheet to try to find what the problem was. And I even said, you know, I was given this spreadsheet by my boss it sounded like it was Q8 and everything else, but apparently not. And he says, we did some bad engineering today. Let's get it fixed and let's move forward. When we got home, I went and talked to my boss and I said, there was a mistake in this, and it basically made me look really, really bad in front of our boss and the client. And he basically said, well, you should have QA'd it. So he did not even underwrite his own mistake. And basically was like, oh, I'm out. What my boss's boss did was the right thing. He went to the client and explained that there was a problem and explained that we were going to fix it. My other boss was willing to throw me under the bus like at the moment's notice. Be the boss that you inspire other people. Don't throw them under the bus. Next, get a mentor. Actually, I should have put mentors. I have 4 of them. I have one that's a technical, I have one that's a leadership, I have one that's business, and then I also have sort of a life balance type of mentor. Have a group of mentors, because each one of those is going to be better at something else, and it can make you a better person yourself. Next, be a mentor. It'll change your life. Do you know what it feels like to have somebody come up and say, would you be my mentor? And you might be saying, you know what, I'm too young, I don't know enough. Yes, you do. You know more than the person who is probably just joining the company. You might know more about a certain system or a certain type of testing than somebody else. You can still mentor them. Be a mentor. Be bold. Go try new things. Have courage. And also, you have to be courageous. I know I just said that, but so here's a great example. Part of my geotechnical journey was with GEAR, which is the Geotechnical Extreme Events Reconnaissance. I was asked to go to Samoa right after their magnitude 8.9 earthquake and tsunami to go do measurements so that we could bring that information back and learn from it. I was on the first scientific team that went into Japan after the 2011 magnitude 9 earthquake. They were still trying to lock down the whole nuclear power plant thing whenever I was there. We stayed definitely, we stayed to the south, but we went and took as many measurements as we could so that we could bring that back. Get into these types of activities where you're contributing as well. And yeah, it's a little scary. We were having like magnitude 7 and magnitude 8 earthquakes while I was over there doing reconnaissance. But because reconnaissance is one of those things that you have to do it quickly, we had to get there and get out. So be bold and be courageous. Have integrity. Okay, we've all seen pictures like this where you have a building and it's fallen over because it had insufficient piles. I mean, this one right here, I think most of those, if you zoom in, they're like almost hollow. But there's another story of a very famous building, not the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but this building. And after it was built, it was tilting. It was brought in to go and take a look at the designs. And as I'm looking at the designs, I'm realizing that given the type of pile, given the type of sand and different types of clays and the depth of bedrock, anyone on this call could realize this was not done properly. To make matters worse, they started to dig a huge hole right next to it. So they were dewatering at the same time as this building is starting to tilt. Now this building is tilted like almost like 2 to 3 degrees. So that might not seem like much, but I'm sure the people in the penthouse probably had their wine glasses sliding around. What happened with this is that it was a very well-known geotechnical organization that did the foundation design. And they had done the foundation design for tens of other major projects within the city. But they were getting squeezed by the contractor. They didn't want the piles to go that deep. It was expensive. They didn't want as many piles. And so in the end, that geotechnical firm signed off on an insufficient plan. Now, everybody knows, well, it's a small community. Everybody knows who these geotechs are. And there's a whole other fiasco where I think the building department got paid off and all this other stuff. But people know who these geotechs are that signed off on an insufficient plan. Have integrity. And this is what I want you to start to think about. When you start to see things like this, start to think about, what would I do in this place? If I was put in this type of predicament, what would I do? This is going to make you a better leader. Look at not only your own failures, but look at other people's failures. And start to think, what would I do? Because nothing new is under the sun. This could happen again. This could happen to the firm that you're with. What would you do in this situation? And if you've already thought about it ahead of time, it makes it a whole lot easier to answer. Next, get out from behind the desk. I know I'm standing at a desk right now, but still, get out there. Go experience all of the different geotechnical projects. The one on the top right, that was an incredible project. We were on all types of peat. We had to use a tracked vehicle to do the CPTs. One of my colleagues was actually walking around and he actually lost a boot in the peat. We learned from this project. It was really exciting. There are all these different parts of your organization that you can learn from. Learn all of these smaller pieces. This is going to help you be a better geotech, and it's also going to help you be a better leader when you start to get to the point where it's like, I know and understand what this person is doing. So get out from behind the desk as much as possible. Breathe. There are going to be times when you are really stressed out. During these times, I just want you to breathe. Scientifically, when we start to take slow, deep breaths, it starts to activate the parasympathetic nerve system. This is our rest and digest system. When we start to get stressed and start to get overwhelmed, just by taking a couple of deep breaths, it brings in focus and reduces stress. So I urge each person on this call, take 15 minutes to unplug. Work out, go for a walk, do yoga, read a book, whatever it is. Give yourself a chance to unplug and just breathe. This will also probably help you with your creativity and your plan for where you want to go in life. Be the unique you. Everybody else is taken. We talked about stop trying to be like somebody else. By being your unique, authentic self, people will start to gravitate towards you. If you're trying to be someone that you're not, trust me, it doesn't work. You're going to slip up. You're going to show your true self, and people are not going to recognize who you are. Be your unique self. And say thanks. And actually show that you mean it. Don't be one of those people who's walking down the hall and is like, hey, thanks, man. Okay, don't do that, okay? Say thank you and mean it. What this means is that you're actually paying attention to people. You understand what they're doing. And you know what? People need recognition. I did a couple of LinkedIn polls and found that almost 80% of people would rather have a thank you from their boss than a raise. Pay attention to your people. Pay attention to your peers. Understand what they're doing. Say thank you. And finally, write the book that you would want to read. You're at the early stages in your life. Go out there and be whatever you can be. Don't come in at the very end of your life and say, hey, you know, I really wish I would have. Don't be that person. So we only have a couple minutes, but would you like to tell me what is your biggest takeaway from today? I know we went over a lot. We went over from like being yourself to Rudy's cards. Okay, get to know your colleagues on a deeper level. Absolutely. Be bold, be courageous. I love it. Communicating with your team, learning how to trust. That was a hard one. Okay, I see that we're almost out of time, so I'm going to go to the, oh, we got one more. Oops, sorry. Start to think about what could you honestly do tomorrow? What small change in your life could you start to become a better leader and to be a geotech? And remember this figure. What are your strengths? What are people looking for in you as a leader? So I'll give you, this is by